Alright, so we've modelled everything, UV mapped the entire character, and it's now ready to put the textures on it. And before we can put textures on it, we can actually start setting up the camera and the lighting and all that stuff. Because when you're putting textures and colours on, and also materials on objects, you want to do test renders to see what it looks like, so you can adjust the settings in the inputs and stuff to get it right. So let's do that first then. So let's set the camera so we know what angle we actually want this to be rendered out in. And so create a camera. There we go. And it's very tiny. Now don't scale it up because it can affect rendering, and the proper way to do that is to go into attribute editor and go to object display, and you can see locator scale. It defaults at 1, and so if you say like 20, there you go, you can see the camera now. It's really big, maybe 10. There you go, decent size, and just bring it back. So that's that bit done. Hit spacebar. We've got the 4 view. What I like to do in the panels here on the left is switch it over to perspective, and then here on the right is switch it over to camera 1. So this is what the camera now sees. And what we want to do next is set up the ratio, or the frame, so we know what is in the frame and what's out of frame. So click on that little icon here, and we can do let's do this now while we're at it. So this is kind of, I don't know, whatever you want to call this piece here. I'm just going to call him I don't know, let's have a look, monster. That's it. And EXR, I like using EXR because it preserves the color from Maya. So if you go into Photoshop and you want to do a bit of post-production, like play around with your hue, saturation, all the levels and stuff, it basically preserves the color. To cut a long story short, Maya tends to render out the color differently than you see it in Photoshop. Photoshop uses RGB, Maya uses like linear workflow, and you get into all kinds of like color space and color management and blah blah blah. And it can be a bit convoluted or confusing if you're new to Maya and rendering. And so to just save yourself a lot of trouble, just use EXR, and it kind of preserves the colors. And use none and single frame. We're only doing one frame. We're not doing a whole animation, so that's why it's grayed out. If you're doing an animation, you'll probably choose this, and then you would state the start frame, end frame, and so boom, there you go. And so this is the important thing. We are using camera 1 to render out of, and not the perspective. And there you go. So let's just do 1K. There we go. And if you want to, for final render, you can do 2K. 1K is enough just to do test renders. Actually, even less than that. We can probably do like half a K. That's just to the reason for that is basically so when we're doing test renders, it kind of renders out quickly, because rendering can be like a time consuming process, and you don't want to wait ages just for one test render to render. You want to work quickly basically. So once you're happy with the settings, then you can go back into here and then like just do much higher, like 1 or 2K. Alright, and here this is a bit too high just to begin with. Let's put everything down to 2. Volume indirect is for like fog, mist, smoke, all that kind of stuff, which we're not using, so you can actually use 0. And transmission is like glass and stuff like that. Let's leave it on that because we might add a bit of translucency to the skin, because SSS is subsurface scattering, which is the kind of material you need when you are doing skin. So we'll leave that as it is. Everything's on 2, should be fine. Right, okay, so we actually need to see the edge of frame here. And the way to do that is to select the camera, click on that little icon here, go to attribute editor, and what we want is display options, switch on resolution, as you can see. I tend to do 1 and black, and then overscan, hold down control, left mouse button click, and just bring it down a bit like that. There we go. So we can see the edge of frame, top, side and bottom. And now we can frame our character. Let's do wireframe for now. There we go. And so I tend to always, look up at my characters because it makes them like bigger and more imposing. Just one other thing I'll just quickly touch. As you can see here, focal length says 35. To display that, go to display, a heads up display. Where are you? Focal length, bank. Now you don't see it. display, heads-up display, focal length. That, boom, it's on 35mm. You can change it. Here you can change it in the attribute editor. In the channel box you can change it here. So 35. If you did so like 12, that's very wide angle and it creates a lot of distortion. There you go. If you want to do that, so it gives it kind of a nightmare look. If you do something like 200, it's a telescopic lens, so it kind of flattens the perspective. So you get very minimum or hardly any distortion. 50 millimeters is generally what the human eye sees, so maybe like that. So it's entirely up to you. 35 by default is fairly wide, so you get some distortion. So we can just leave it at 35. It's fine. So once you're happy with the framing, let's have a look. I don't like it looking down. I prefer it looking up. Maybe a bit to the side. There you go. Click on this to lock the camera so you can't accidentally move it. And one other thing is to create a floor or background. So click on this, got a plane. Let's make it bigger. There we go. And we don't need all that resolution on it, and just drop it down to where are you? 1. Grab this here, hit extrude, and lift it up. There you go. And also what you can do is to soften this here. It's to select this edge and do a bevel and just add some segments. Just bring it in a little bit. Maybe like that. That's it, 3. Let's take a look. Yeah, seems fine. We can make it a bit tighter just by adding another edge loop here. There we go. Looks fine. We can call this background. We can grab all these pieces here, Control G, and then just, there we go, hit W, there we go, and we can call this the character. G for group. Make live geo, let's switch it on. We don't need it anymore, the make live geo, so right click, select objects, delete it, and then right click, delete layer. Projected curve, we don't want it, so select object, delete it, delete the layer, and eyeballs, delete the layer. And so click on all of the objects on the character, up arrow key, we have the entire group, as you can see, character group, and let's just put the character on its own layer. There we go. And so we can say this is the character layer. Boom. And then you got the background, we can put on a separate layer. There we go. So a background layer. And switch it off. Now the image plane, we don't want it anymore, really. We can use it to sample the colours for now, but we don't need to see it in the where we go. Boom, switch it off. And so there you have it. So we've got the background set up, we've grouped our character, we've got the camera set up, there you have it. Everything seems fine. Control S, save your scene. Alright, so we'll end the video there and I'll see you next video.